Hi, welcome to another video in pre-calculus, and in this video we are going to discuss about graphing of circular functions, particularly the sine and cosine. So what are we waiting for? Let's start. So in graphing the sine and cosine functions, we have to take note of its properties and important terms. So in graphing, importante kaayo nga kumakabalot ta sa iyahang domain and range so that you will be guided kung asa ra kutob ang iyahang graph. In sine cosine, we recall that sine x is equal to sine theta for an angle theta with measure x radians. And that is, ang sine theta nato is mo to siya ang second coordinate sa unit circle. Since si x na corresponds man siya kang theta, makaingon ta nga ang sine x is defined for any real number x. Or, in other words, the domain of the sine function is real numbers. And take note that these real numbers refers to the angles that is in radian form. And also, the range of sine is the set of all numbers between -1 and 1 inclusive, meaning included si 1 and -1. In the same manner, these definitions ma-apply pod nato siya diri akang cosine x. So let's start graphing y is equal to sine x. In graphing, we all know the basic requirement, or ang pinaka-basic yun inig mag-graph ta is to have a table of values, no? So that we will know unsa nga points ang atong ipang-plot. Okay. So in graphing the y equals sine x, we are going to refer to the unit circle. So atong i-transform ning values in the unit circle to the table of values. So since our function is sine x, ang ato lang tan-awon diri is the sine value, and we know that sine is equal to y, so kani atong pangtan-awon. Okay? And our domain is the angles, which is in radian form, so our table of values looks like this. So if our angle is equal to 0, the value of our sine is 0. If our angle is pi over 6, the value of our sine is 1/2. If our domain is pi over 4, the value of our sine is square root of 2 over 2. So, hangtod siya malokop din niya ang unit circle. So, if namoy napansin dirian na atay double nga value, duha ka value sa y, these values here sa ubos is just the decimal form of the values dinhi sa ibabaw. Gituyo na ko na aron nga mas dali nato siya malocate sa ato ang Cartesian plane. Mas dali ta maka-estimate sa iyahang value or sa iyahang location. So let's proceed with graphing. So of course, you have to prepare a graphing paper or a Cartesian plane. Okay, there you are. So balik na atong table of values para na atay guide. And ibutang na nato ato ang domain and range. So ang ato ang range, ako ang gibahin siya into 4 para mas maklaro nato itong mga 0.25 katong mga fraction nga part, no? We use the scaling, and we have here the domain, which are the angles in radian forms. So para guided ta kung saan siya nga mga angles, akong gi-indicate ang ato ang mga angles in terms of degree measure. But take note, this is not allowed to put the angle in degree measures as your domain because they are not in real numbers. They are not real numbers. So let's start plotting. We'll start with here. So 0. If x is 0, so y is 0. If x is pi over 6, this is 1/2 and 0.71. Okay, and so on. So after na nato ma-plot ang mga points, the last step is we are going to connect them with a smooth curve. So muna ni siya ang atong graph ni y is equal to sine x. So observe what happened. So itong nakita diri, di ba? The graph of y equals sine x is mura siya og ganing wave lang siya, mura siya wave. And actually kani siya, it forms a one cycle. So one cycle na siya, isa na siya katuyukan. Okay. So let me show you the graph of y equals sine x in 2 cycles. So here, ganina, gipakita na to ang katong one cycle which is tama lang siya kang 2 pi and another cycle 2 pi hangtod kang 4 pi. So kung ma-notice ninyo, nagbalik-balik lang gyud ang ato ang angle. No, wala po siya ni palabi og taas, wala po siya ni palabi og ubos. The same lang gyud gihapon siya. So with this nga nagbalik-balik lang ang pattern sa atong graph, makaingon ta nga ang sine x is a periodic function with a period of 2 pi. No? So it will repeat one cycle every 2 pi. Okay, so this one, this is the one cycle of y equals sine x. So if ato pong i-graph ang atong cosine x, they are just the same with the sine x. The same gyapon, periodic lang siya and it repeats with 2 pi. Ang nakalainan lang is mag-start siya diri sa 1 kay if our angle is 0, so cosine 0 is equal to 1, no? You may refer to the unit circle. So, mura gyapon ni siya. So, ang atong one cycle ani kani diri. So, kani siya. So, we are showing here the two cycles of the graph of y is equal to cosine x. So, how do we sketch the graph of the sine and cosine functions? Okay, so before that, let us know first the different equations of sine and cosine functions. So, we have four conditions or four types of equations. So we have the first one which was discussed earlier, y equals sine x. The second one, y is equal to a sine bx. Third, y is equal to a sine b times the quantity of x minus c. And the fourth one, y is equal to a sine b times the quantity of x minus c plus d. Unsa man ni siya, ma'am? Where a determines the amplitude. So we will get the amplitude by getting the absolute value of our a. B determines the period, and the formula of our period is this one, 2 pi over the absolute value of B. Our C is the horizontal phase shift, or it is the shift on the domain, while D is the vertical phase shift, or the shift on the range. So we will know more about these variables once we discuss the examples. So let's start with the steps first in graphing the sine and cosine functions. So, sa may mga steps. So, the first one, i-determine nato ang amplitude, ang range, ang period, which is can be used using this formula, and the interval. Second, divide the interval into 4 equal parts and get 5 division points. So, importante ining 5 division points kay mo ni atong gamiton inig evaluate sa function. So, after nato ma-evaluate ang function, we will now plot the points on the Cartesian plane and join them with a smooth curve. Okay, kasagaran, ang i-require ning mag-graphing is one cycle lang, but we don't know. Some questions will require 2 cycles, 3 cycles. So, if mag-require siya of more cycles, you can extend the graph to the right or to the left. So, if needed lang pod siya. So let's proceed now with our first example. Sketch the graph of y is equal to 2 sine 4x. Okay, by just looking at the equation, we can identify now some of the variables. We have our a and we have our b. So ang atong a is 2 and b is 4. So we'll proceed to the first step. Identify the amplitude. So our amplitude is just the absolute value of 2, so that is 2. And our period is just 2 pi over the absolute value of b. Substitute the 4 and you get pi over 2. So kaning si amplitude, mo ni siya ang mahimo po natong basihan kung unsa ang atong range sa function. So the range will be from -2 to +2, while our period is from 0 to pi over 2. So meaning, makakomplete na tag one cycle with this interval 0 and pi over 2. So kaning interval, muna ni siya ato ang bahinon into 4 equal parts, or magkuha ta og 5 division points, and that will be in this next step. Okay, step 2, divide the interval into 4 equal parts. So since our interval is the domain, the domain, so we will denote this as x sub 1, our 0. Ato namang na-discuss ganina nga naatay 5 division points. So naatay x sub 1, since interval man siya, so meaning kaning si pi over 2 mo ni siya atong x sub 5, no? Okay, so using these two values or domains, atong pangitaon ang uban pa nga mga division points. So we have x sub 1, x sub 2, x sub 3, x sub 4, ug x sub 5. So pangitaon na to karon si x sub 2, si x sub 3, ug si x sub 4. So using the midpoint formula. So first is pangitaon na to una si x sub 3. So ma-obtain na to si x sub 3 by getting the sum of x sub 1 and x sub 5 divided by 2. Kay si x sub 3 mo man ni siya ang midpoint ni x sub 1 ug ni x sub 5. So we have 0 as our x sub 1, pi over 2 as our x sub 5. So add all of them, add the 2 and divided by 2. So we obtain pi over 4. So our x sub 3 is pi over 4. Since na naman tayo x sub 3, kaon na to ang midpoint ni x sub 1 o x sub 3 which is x sub 2. The same process lang gihapon. So 0 plus pi over 4 over 2, we obtain pi over 8. And lastly, with the same process, we obtain x sub 4 by adding or getting the midpoint between x sub 3 and x sub 5. So we have 3 pi over 8. So kani nga mga values ni x mo ni itong gamiton inig mag-evaluate na ta sa atong function nga y is equal to 2 sine 4x. So that will be on the next step. Okay, in here, in step 3, let's evaluate the function and we have the x values. Mo ni siya atong 5 division points. Si 0, pi over 8, pi over 4, 3 pi over 8, ug si pi over 2. And so, let's find the y, which is our 2 sine 4x. So if we are going to substitute 0 to our x, so mahimo siyang 2 sine 0. Sine 0 is just equal to 0. So times 2, that's equal to 0. If our x is pi over 8, so just substitute. Okay, ma-cancel out nato si 4 and 8. Ma-simplify nato siya. So mahimo siyang pi over 2. So sine pi over 2 is equal to 1. 1 times 2, mo na siya nga naatay 2. And you can just repeat the process. Ag mo ni siya atong ma-obtain nga mga values. So after you obtain the values of the function, we can now proceed to the last step, which is to plot the points and join them with smooth curve. So first prepare your plane and then the domain. Okay, so plot the points. If 0, it is 0. Here it is 2, 0, negative 2, 0, and then combine them. So we have now the graph of y is equal to sine 2 sine 4x. Okay, so we will continue the next example on the next video because taas na siya gamay. So see you. I hope that naamoy nakutlo gamay about this topic. So see you in the next lesson. Bye!